Hey, what's up guys, this is Liam or Weagle on your Overwatch, back with a new video. Today I want to talk about how to stall, how not to stall, when to last minute engage, when to trickle onto the point, what's best at what time, and for the reasons as well. I feel like a lot of people don't know this. Even playing around the Grandmasters level, people still don't seem to understand when trickling's okay and when it isn't. So I want to go through the specific scenarios because this issue causes tilting, especially in capture point, and that is where the real issue lies, in trying to capture that second point. But I am going to go through all of the game modes, and the first one I want to do is Control, or King of the Hill. So in King of the Hill, you have an initial fight with the enemy team and someone wins the point. If you win that point and your time is ticking up, usually it's fine for the whole game for you to keep trickling in and using ultimates, because as long as you don't lose that point, you keep getting your points all the way up to 100, and until then, the amount of contesting they do doesn't matter because you always gain points. So you can just keep trickling in with Tracer or Winston, or you don't even have to be using anyone fast if your team are also sustaining. You just get back into the fight. And a lot of King of the Hill games have won this way. A lot of the time, the first team that captures the first point will win because no one knows how to properly regroup. It's fine if you have the point, but on the flip side, that's where you lose games very easily. If you lose the initial fight and the enemy team cap the point, when you all respawn as a team, you've maybe got 3 fights ahead of you before you lose the game. That means you've got like no room for error. If you trickle once, you lose a fight. You only get one more fight. If you trickle again, you pretty much lost the game. It's very, very brutal. And this is what happens in 2CP, which I'll get onto, but you don't have many fights when you're down in the advantage. So what you have to make sure you do in King of the Hill is you have to regroup completely back all the way up. No poking, no damage, just hide from the enemy team and go back in, because you're only going to have a few attempts at it. And that's how brutal Overwatch is throughout all the game modes. In King of the Hill, it's fine to trickle if you have it, but you cannot trickle if you don't have the point and your points aren't adding up towards that 100. The only time, of course, when you are losing it's okay to trickle is if it's the end of the game. You can try and do it as much at the end of the game there, that's fine, because you don't have any more of a choice. But during the whole mid-fight, during the rest of the game, when the enemy team have it, you have to regroup. You cannot trickle. You have to get in and get a kill. If you get 1 kill and the enemy team also trade on you, again, you probably have to back up and make sure you have a full team fight. It's very much like 2CP. When you're down, you have to wipe the team, or else they're just going to trickle in and keep the advantage, and things will not go well for you, and it causes your team to tilt because they feel like 1,000,001 things are going wrong. But really, all that happened was you probably lost the initial fight a little bit, they got the point, you didn't, and then you've just trickled in for the whole game. So now I want to move on to 2CP, and this is where things get more complicated, and this is where people tilt off the side of the planet in the middle of the game because they're getting frustrated and not being able to push the enemy team back. So let's take Hanamura for an example, but Anubis and Volskaya, they're all basically the same map. They're all very, very similar, with one initial choke with one little flank ruse. So you come up to the first point of Hanamura and they're set up and you try and get a kill. If you trade for 1-for-1 as the attackers there, you're actually at an advantage because of respawn advantage. You spawn twice as close as they do. It's nowhere near as far for you to run back up that hill to initiate again. So it's much easier on 2CP to get that first point just because of pure respawn advantage. If you're the defenders in that situation and you trade 1-for-1, a lot of the time you have to hope the enemy don't just come in and initiate on you, and you have to be prepared to back up and maybe even give them a little bit of time on the point to get a little bit, maybe 1 or 2/3 of it even, to initiate again as a full team. Now, the one thing that definitely swings 2CP at the minute is Symmetras, because they get the teleporter and effectively they then spawn closer. That's why the teleporter is so good, is so you can get back into the fight as quickly as the enemy do. Now, where things get really complicated and 99% of the tilt comes from is the second part of a 2CP map. And this is where the respawn swap completely, giving the defenders an absolutely enormous advantage over the attackers in most of these 2CP maps over the whole game. And Anubis is probably the worst offender, is that the point is right outside their spawn. So what you have to do as an attacking team is you have to completely wipe the enemy team pretty much at the same time and allow minimal trickle in order to kill them and get the point. It is never okay to trickle as the attacker into CP. If you trade 1 for 1 at the start of an attacking second point on Anubis or Hanamura or Volskaya, you cannot fight. You have to back up. As soon as you've lost someone and you're not team wiping them, you have to back up. You can't keep poking. And what happens there is people get frustrated and people do keep poking, and more trades and more trades and more trades. And then what will happen when the team actually get a 6 together and they go forwards, the enemy team have all their ults built up from all the trickling you've done and they wipe you again. You might get a kill or two, but that doesn't matter because of the sheer amount of respawn advantage that they have. Unless you are getting the 1 or 2 picks at the start of every fight, what you have to do actually is pretend to engage on the enemy team. You have to try and get the ultimates out of them. You have to go in with the mindset of wiping the entire team. There is no way to win a trickle fight really on attack on 2CP. And 2CP has a outrageous like 20% draw ratio or something. It's crazy. They draw so much, way more than any other game mode, and that's because people get mad and tilted because they keep trickling and they keep losing ult fights. You have to make sure you have the whole team with you and you have to kill people straight away. And if you trade 1 for 1, regroup again. Sometimes I've stood there for 5 or 6 minutes doing this, but we will win the fight in the end if you regroup and push in and wipe them at the same time. Now, one thing that does happen a lot is in overtime the attackers win because the defenders get a really crappy respawn disadvantage where they have a longer timer on the cooldown of the respawn. So that's why people win in overtime. There, of course, it's the end of the game. You're allowed to trickle, same as King of the Hill. You absolutely have to trickle there because you're going to lose the game. But before that, how many times have you had 6 minutes where it felt like you didn't have one fight? And the reason is they have a huge advantage and you have to wipe them as a team in order to take that point. Regrouping means literally that. Regroup, back up. Don't even try to fight. Don't give the enemy the opportunity to get a hook on you, to drag you in and further delay your respawn advantage. You stand in there poking at the choke when the enemy is spawning next to it, even if you get a kill, is no good to your team. Especially if one of you are in respawn anyway, because you still aren't up in that fight. A 5v5 is not an even fight in 2CP. You have to be at least up by 1 kill, if not 2, and the enemy team have to be gone straight away. You cannot allow a mate to stay on point. You cannot allow anything, because the more trickle that you give them, the more advantage they have over you, and they're already miles ahead. So 2CP is very difficult. You have to not get frustrated, and sometimes you might stand there for 3 or 4 minutes just trying to regroup with your team, but it will be worth it eventually. It's a game mode that I think everyone hopes to see fixed as soon as possible, because it is very, very frustrating, and you absolutely cannot trickle in it, and you cannot go and stall the point on attack. Now, on defense, you can pretty much stall as much as you like on the second point. When it's the first point, I've already explained that you have to be very careful with defending and making sure that you don't trade just 1 for 1, but it flips completely on its head, and even more so when the attackers are on the second point and the defenders are on their second point, because as the defender, you spawn next to it, you can trickle pretty much as much as you like. If your team are as good as theirs and you're both trickling, you're never going to lose on defense, and that's just the harsh truth of 2CP at the minute. So the next thing to talk about is payload. Now, a lot of the payload maps are fairly even at the start and during the Streets Phase 2 in terms of the respawn advantage. And if you haven't noticed so far, respawn advantage really does determine whether you can trickle or not. When you're playing Route 66 at the start, you go up the hill, you walk it around the corner. If you get a kill and they get a kill, it's fairly even. The spawns are about the same distance. As you move it closer to that point, maybe the defenders have a slight advantage over you. However, in payload, until the last point, it's usually a fairly even spawn advantage. In payload, generally what happens is the attacking team will have the advantage at the start of each section, but as the payload moves further through the section towards the other side, it swaps in the defender's favour. But here is the most important thing about trying to stall when you are playing payload. Going in 1 by 1 by 1 is never going to work as a defenders, and something that a lot of people don't get their heads around, and this is honestly the best way to do it, is you don't trickle at all. If you have to give the enemy team most of Streets Phase, which is the second point of any payload map, it's nearly always a Streets type phase, you can give them all of that. just don't trickle. Just wait until the last possible second and you go out as a full team. You fully regroup and you go out as a team and take that point, because then not only have you stopped them getting it to that next point, but you've also got the respawn advantage over them. Because it's all the way near the defender's side, you spawn nearer to it, and it's much easier to then trickle onwards for the rest of the game. Now this is, again, a very hard concept because people don't understand really what trickling is and when it's okay. And on defense, it's okay if you've got the advantage. It's that simple. The spawn advantage is the main thing. But trickling, when done properly, can be done in a full team. You just have to wait for the last second, give them most of a point and jump on it. That then gives you the spawn advantage and the opportunity to fully hold that last point. But 99% of the time, what happens, guys? It's in my games, it's in all your games. When you're playing Streets phase, you go one by one by one by one, and you lose Streets phase nearly every time. No one really holds in Streets, and the reason is people trickle too early. If you just wait, give them most of the point for free, go in and win that last fight, that is how you hold on Payload. Now, Hybrid is a little bit different because some of the points are very awkward. Like Eichenwald's almost unique, where it feels just really difficult to attack all the way, whereas Numbani, which is also Hybrid, is kind of hard to take the first point, but Streets is easy, and then the third point's hard. Again, these are a little bit mixed up, but respawn advantage is the main thing to look at. If you have it, it's okay to trickle, but if it's Payload in particular, you have to go out at the last point as a team. Now, you can use this concept as well on 2CP, but it's a lot more difficult because they get it very, very quickly. They probably have a lot of ult stacks, and it only takes a few seconds from them to get 0 points to 4 points if none of you are contesting. But you can do it on there as well, but it's very hard to convince people to do so. This is an issue that's been in the community forever, and I hope eventually we'll kind of wean it out a little bit. I think the 2CP will be fixed in a way that makes it a little bit more fair anyway, because it's absolutely outrageous how close the defenders spawn to the second point. We'll have to see what Blizzard do with that over time. Just remember, guys, the #1 rule: if you have spawn advantage, trickling is okay. But you're always better off going at the very, very last second to take a point than going in one by one if you can afford to. If I missed anything, the comment section is the place to go. Be sure to check out our Twitter, our Discord, and our Twitch, where you can see us play live. You can group with people to play with. You can also see funny stuff that we tweet, things from the stream, and I hope you enjoy them if you check them out. Be sure to drop a like and subscribe if you guys enjoyed, and have a great day as always. Take care and peace, people.